I must admit, it sounds like a cliche, but reality, people are a company's greatest resource. Here's another reality. Personnel costs. Do you realize that a company's greatest single expense item is personnel cost? So as we enter budgeting season and workforce planning for 2015, isn't it important for IT leaders to know just what's going on in the IT employment landscape? Greetings, everyone. It's Tuesday, October 21st, 2014, and this is Tech Talk with Technology Association of Georgia President Tino Mantella. I'm your guest host, Frank Baia. Up to the Tech Talk with what IT leaders need to know is Douglas Ross, president of Synergis, a company he founded in 1997. The Atlanta-based information technology and creative marketing staffing firm has now become one of the leaders in the industry, serving technology and tech-enabled customers ranging in size from the Fortune 500 to emerging and mid-sized growth firms in over 30 states, and has branch offices in California's Silicon Valley and Birmingham, Alabama. Synergis, recognized for operational excellence and thought leadership, receiving numerous accolades such as Best Place to Work and making the Inc. 500 list multiple times. Doug leverages his 30-year career in virtually every aspect of the staffing industry to set the company's vision, mission, and strategy, and leads the overall operations for the firm. Twice recognized by the Atlanta Chamber of Commerce as Entrepreneur of the Year and for the TurkNet Leadership Group Leadership Character Award, Doug is a past officer of the Atlanta chapters of the TechServe Alliance and the National Technical Services Association. He is a regular contributor on employment issues to the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. Discover Georgia's real overall unemployment rate and just what is the IT employment market like, from which roles are in high demand and why, to the skills in most demand. It's a Tech Talk focus on workforce planning for 2015, what companies are doing to address demand, and what IT employees are really looking for, as we speak with Synergis founder and president, Doug Ross. This edition of Tech Talk is brought to you by GlobalSpeak.com, new media consultants, corporate video and audio communications, video and audio production and distribution, live and virtual event production. Tag TV and Tag Radio is a service of GlobalSpeak.com, creatively delivering powerful marketing, video, and audio solutions. Doug, welcome to Tech Talk.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, I think we got an absolutely perfect situation as it relates to some real opportunity for our listeners to gain some really, really important insight. Obviously, the budgeting season and the workforce planning is going to get going pretty heavy as far as 2015 is concerned. I guess we can get down to what does an IT leader really need to know about the IT employment landscape. So let's go ahead and just kind of dive into that, as they say, and get granular. Question number one, Georgia's overall unemployment rate is still pretty high. I think it's 8.1. What is the IT employment market like?
Sure. Well, I think that we are all pleased to see that the IT employment market is strong right now. It's right at about 4 to 5%. And to put that into some context, conventional wisdom is that full unemployment occurs at about the 5% rate. In a full employment economy, openings are filled within a reasonable period of time because supply and demand are fairly equally matched. And I guess unfortunately or fortunately, depending on which side of the table you're on, IT unemployment is about half the rate of the overall workforce. And in fact, in some IT skill sets, unemployment is as low as 1%, which really as a practical matter is akin to having negative unemployment. So this causes a real skill gap, and many roles are going unfilled. In fact, the average IT-related role remains open for an average of 3 months.
Well, obviously, skill does matter, and we hear a lot about the ones that are in most demand. I'm going to assume that they're the same as the issues we see in the headlines, but maybe kind of go into that. Which roles are in high demand and why?
Sure. Well, you're absolutely right. As you might expect, IT security, which is in the headlines quite a bit recently, is extremely hot, and demand is growing. Certainly web development skills, particularly in specialties like mobile application development, responsive web design, and demand generation, and in particular through email marketing and search engine optimization are all in high demand. And of course, with so much web content being generated these days, storage is also a huge issue, and those skills are definitely in demand. And importantly, as are business-related IT skills such as project management, business analysis, and IT leadership skills, those are all highly sought after. But the problem is really exacerbated by the fact that U.S. universities are just not producing enough science, technology, engineering, and mathematics grads. And while we're fortunate here to have great universities like Georgia Tech and UGA and Kennesaw, as well as a number of other IT-centric vocational skills, and TAG has, of course, recognized the problem and is trying to generate more interest in those fields through its STEM outreach programs. The fact is that we're just not meeting demand, and it's a problem that has been going on for many years, and it's probably going to take several years to correct.
So much discussion, a lot of publicity goes on about STEM, and it isn't until you actually connect the dots and see the result of the lack of the graduates and the lack of the resource that it begins to play such a critical role. We're already seeing indications of it now. It's almost like a form of global warming kind of a thing. You can maybe agree or disagree with it, but if you don't pay attention, the end result can be pretty challenging in the long run for your company and for the Georgia economy as a whole. Let's talk about, there's, I guess, a cliche that says that you can't lose what you never had.
Right.
What can you do about, if you're a company, to address the demand?
Well, I think we're all doing a lot of things right these days. I think it starts with good workforce planning that includes forecasting and having plans for both recruiting and training and development. I think it's also important to focus on retention these days. You may be surprised to know that 1 in 4 IT professionals are contemplating a job change compared to 1 in 5 in the overall U.S. workforce. So the unexpected really has to be anticipated and addressed, and I think the best companies are using just about every resource at their disposal. This includes campus recruiting, beefing up internal recruiting efforts, offering employee referral bonuses, utilizing external staffing firms, and outsourcing some roles and functions. These days it's really an integrated workforce strategy.
Well, I was just reading an article just recently where they're even locating more conveniently to try to get pockets of their particular demographics to find good IT workers. So
sure.
You could, especially say in the case of Atlanta, nobody really likes to talk about it, but that terrible 4-letter word called traffic that still continues to be a challenge for even some of the IT workers as far as getting back and forth and being in a convenient situation that not only do they do what they enjoy, but they live in a different lifestyle. A lot of companies even talk about the culture of their company. It's a kind of a different perspective, but what are IT employees looking for these days? I mean, obviously convenience and some culture, but maybe get more specific as to what are some of the things that you, in effect, kind of must have in order to attract the right kind of people.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I do think it depends on the demographics of the workforce that you're trying to hire. For example, recent grads are probably less experienced about benefits, and obviously they're willing to earn less, at least in the short term, if they feel that they're aligned with the vision and the mission of the company. So I'm glad you mentioned company culture. They also want to know that there's an opportunity to gain experience and skills. Some will want promotional opportunities, but don't necessarily equate growth with a promotion. It's really more of an intrinsic motivation, probably more so than in previous generations. And even with experienced professionals, money isn't always the answer. Certainly salaries have to be competitive, and benefits and stability are probably more important than some other perks. But again, I think it comes down to creating a positive company culture and then hiring people who share the vision. And I think it's really important for IT leaders to clearly articulate the vision and the mission of the company, and then translate that to how the work contributes to the greater good of the company or society. Mm-hmm. You have to remember that people still leave most often because of their boss.
Well, so much of it is camaraderie also. I mean, the community. One of the things that is a hot ticket right now, a buzz thing, is the co-working spaces and the amount of venture capital that's going into startups. And so much of what they're doing is just creating a community atmosphere where there's a collaboration and an openness of conversation. So I'm going to think that culture aspect is a dynamic challenge that is constantly changing. How does it's kind of my own curiosity in this particular case, but how can an IT executive really stay that relevant and that sensitive to the situation, being that it's so fluid, or do you really need to outsource and deal with a vendor that kind of provides that type of expertise on a continuing basis?
Well, I think certainly, an outside perspective is helpful, and we make a lot of investments in our organization. I know a lot of our clients make a lot of investments in leadership development, and I think it's a worthwhile investment to make, no doubt about it. It really does come down to, though, as you said, relevancy, and again, clearly communicating, what that role does to meet the overall vision and mission of the organization.
Well, as we close up, and again, the focus being on 2015, kind of not a fair question to ask, seeing how I think you actually do this as a profession. But
Right.
I'm going to say, how about giving us a few pieces of advice for IT leaders who are getting ready for 2015?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think from a budget standpoint, I think it's fair to say that we should expect to see some salary inflation. I think it'll be manageable and probably in the 3 to 5% range for most skills, assuming that salaries are already competitive to begin with. I know that some of our clients are offering what they will call hot skills pay in certain skill sets, and increases might be higher for some of the roles that I mentioned earlier. From a leadership standpoint, I would again say make people and the culture of the company a priority. I think it's important to consider the hiring process and make the candidate experience a positive one. And again, spending some time and effort and making investments in both leadership development as well as career development at all levels is very, very important. I think it's far less disruptive and costly to retain an employee than to find a new one. And I'm more than happy to provide additional information if somebody would like some background information.
Share. How do we get some more information? That's great.
Sure, absolutely. You can certainly feel free to call me at 770-346-7210 or by email at doug.ross@synergisit.com.
Well, it's a dynamic situation. I mean, obviously, over the course of literally doing Tech Talks for many, many years, and across all of the verticals, you begin to start to think everything's the same, only different.
That's so true.
Obviously, the impacts of just quote-unquote disruptive technology, but also the radical changes that are happening in the workplace and the dynamics that a business leader has to face in trying to keep up not only with the competition, but keeping up with the innovation that constantly changes the market. Doug, great input, great advice. We certainly know the contribution that you make to the technology industry, and want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule for joining us for a few minutes today on Tech Talk.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.